Hi, hey, hello. Facebuster Wrestling Podcast, episode 12. No, you did not miss one. Last week, I erroneously declared that I was in the process of recording episode 10. I had a mini celebration and everything. Once I uploaded that podcast, I counted my videos and saw that it was episode 11. So I am a fool. I am a stupid, dumb idiot. That was episode 11. I celebrated for nothing. But I might just make that my tradition moving forward. I will just randomly celebrate odd episode numbers. Like when we get to episode 23, I'll have some sort of party, a celebration of some kind. But I feel, as somebody who has followed several different wrestling podcasts throughout the years, a lot of people who start these podcasts and get going and get a little steam, a lot of them, let's be honest, don't make it past like episode 2 or 3. They kind of lose interest or get busy or whatever. So I was happy to reach a nice round even number. I thought 10 was reason to say something, which I did, and it was a complete foolish mistake. I was celebrating episode 11. I completely glossed over episode 10. So, what an amateur I am. I will not make that mistake again moving forward, even though I probably will. Let's forget that happened. Let's move forward and forgive me for my sins. This is, and correctly so, episode number 12. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Good to see you. How are you doing? I hope you are doing very well. Anyway, let's get into this week in the WWE. We will start first with NXT. Now, before I get started, actually, let's put some things into perspective here. Let's look at where we are on the calendar. We are in mid to late May, and historically, most tenured wrestling fans, we realize this period of time is usually a slow time for professional wrestling. At least in the WWE, it tends to be, coming out of WrestleMania and all this the pomp and circumstance of the biggest show of the year. This tends to be a time in wrestling, in WWE, where things start to slow down a little bit. Things aren't as exciting and interesting. And the last couple weeks, I've been kind of feeling that a little bit. Not as much as before. And a lot of that I contribute to everything sort of resetting after the draft. Everything is fresh and new, so they're starting anew. They're starting fresh. They're in the process of building new storylines, building new rivalries. In the case of NXT, it slowed down a little bit. And I contribute that to them losing so much talent to the main roster in the draft this year. There was a lot of NXT talent this year that was picked from NXT and is no longer contributing to that brand. There are still, like, you'll see Von Wagner still on NXT for some reason. I mean, he is a free agent, whatever that means completely, but most of those previously crucial characters in NXT are now on the main roster, and they're kind of starting from scratch in a lot of ways. I think we're experiencing a bit of a lull. It tends to happen around this time of year, heading into summertime, late spring. Things start to get rolling again prior to SummerSlam and Money in the Bank and events like that. But we tend to see during this season, things are a little bit lackluster. Things are not as in-your-face, exciting and interesting as they are other parts of the year. A lot of that, you could say it's because it's summertime. It's going to be nice all of the time. People aren't sitting around watching wrestling every single time it's on. Summer vacation, people are away from their homes, their TVs, they've got shit to do. So it's expected, and it's kind of been the way it's been for a long time. So I think in this case, I think we can be thankful that there are at least still some interesting things going on. And we'll get into some of that stuff moving forward, but there have been years at this point in the year where it's like, geez, man, there is absolutely nothing to look forward to on WWE programming. This year feels a little better. Yes, it is a slow time, but also there are things that can maintain our interests. We still have the bloodline stuff going on, even though that feels like it's kind of in a lull as well. New stuff developing post draft, and there are things to look forward to and to watch with interest. It's just a little bit tapered back, and that's to be expected. But I think let's not take it for granted this year that at least they're giving us some stuff to look forward to and some stuff to keep us entertained, and it's not a complete shit show as we've seen years previous. So with that said, let's get into NXT. We have a little bit more clarity on who will be moving forward in the NXT Women's Championship Tournament. We had Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez moving on after their matches. Cora Jade beat Fallon Henley, and Roxanne Perez beat JC Jane. And so following that, we will now be seeing Tiffany Stratton versus Roxanne Perez and Lyra Valkyria versus Cora Jade. This worries me because, as you've heard me say, I love Tiffany Stratton and I love Lyra Valkyria. They are two of my pillars of the future for women's wrestling in WWE and NXT. But, of course, Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade have moved on in this tournament, and it's set up in such a way with Stratton versus Perez and Lyra versus Jade that we could very well see Roxanne Perez versus Cora Jade. A revisiting of that storied friendship turned rivalry, which I guess they assume that all of us love. I am not that big of a fan of Cora Jade or Roxanne Perez. I am more of a fan of Tiffany Stratton and Lyra Valkyria. I would rather those two face off for the NXT Women's Championship, but I have a sinking feeling it's going to be Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade. It just makes too much sense storyline-wise. And if that does happen, I would anticipate actually Cora Jade to have her shot this time at the championship. I think she would end up beating Roxanne Perez. But god damn it, do I want it to be Tiffany Stratton versus Lyra Valkyria. Give me either of those two as the next NXT Women's Champion, but I'd rather it be Tiffany Stratton. I think she's just... They've been pushing her so hard. I think it's her time to shine. I think it's not a matter of now or never, but this would be the perfect time and opportunity for them to put the strap on Tiffany Stratton. I would take Lyra as well. I could go either way if that ends up being the finals of this tournament, but I just can't see them not taking advantage of the previous storyline of Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade. So that is the title pictures looking a little bit more clear, and we're beginning to see what we're going to get at Battleground as far as that goes. We also had the USA NXT debut of Supernova Sessions, a talk show which was previously on NXT UK, hosted by Noam Dar. His guest was Dragon Lee. You know, typical heel talk show segment. It's essentially Noam Dar having guests on a show where he doesn't really give a shit about them. He uses it as an opportunity to slander them and promote himself. Pretty typical stuff. I'm sure some of you saw that on NXT UK. So he's talking to Dragon Lee, and Dragon Lee's wanting a shot at his Heritage Cup, and Noam Dar is coming up with excuses. Nathan Frazier comes out, who also has a talk show for some reason, or a news segment parody thing, which I don't know why that's a thing, but it is. But he's essentially calling out Noam Dar for trying to make up stupid rules and giving excuses as to why he's not going to defend the Heritage Cup. And that leads to Noam Dar accepting a challenge to fight Dragon Lee one-on-one next week. I assume this is leading to a Heritage Cup championship match at Battlegrounds, probably with Dragon Lee, which is fine. That'll be fun to watch. I really enjoyed the Heritage Cup style matches that they had in NXT UK. They were different. They're interesting. It's a nice cleansing of the palate, during the course of a traditional wrestling show. It's just it spices things up a little bit. I like the format, so that'll be fun to see if it does happen. We have Wes Lee come out to address everybody because he is upset that his tag team match with Tyler Bate was canceled by Schism. I didn't get this segment. This was a bit odd to me. So he's out there, he's saying, he's learning to control his anger, and he gets pissed off when he gets attacked or his friends get attacked or whatever. And Gacy starts giving him shit and telling him he wants a shot at the North American Championship. Wesley's like, all you had to do was ask. And then Gacy brings up, like, well, you'll have to break the news to Tyler Bate. Tyler Bate comes out, and Gacy's like, yeah, Tyler Bate wants a shot at that championship too. And Tyler Bate is eventually like, yeah, I do. I'm not going to lie, I do want a shot at that championship. And Wes gets upset because apparently this was a breach of trust that Tyler Bate wanted a shot at a championship that he holds. And the segment ends. Wes Lee's looking at Tyler Bate like, what the fuck, dude? I thought I could trust you. And, like, what? Of course Tyler Bate wants a shot at the North American Championship. Just because you are the champion and he's your friend, that's a breach of trust. That doesn't sit well with me as far as explanation goes. I just don't understand it. I would think Wesley would be like, yeah, why wouldn't my friend Tyler Bate, one of the best here in NXT, want a shot at my championship? That's not a surprise to me. But instead, this is like shocking, baffling news to him, and it's a breach of trust between two friends. What the? I don't get it. So it leads to a weird setup, and out of it, we're getting Wesley defending his championship in a triple threat against Tyler Bate and Joe Gacy. Just the way this came off, Wesley. This isn't. This doesn't feel right coming from Wesley. He's a guy whose history shows he'll take anybody on, and he's ready for a fight with anyone, and he'll defend his championship whenever against whoever. And just because Tyler Bate, who has been his friend for 2 or 3 weeks now, wants a shot at it, it's like backstabbing situation. I don't get it. But that sets up that match for the future. It looks like WWE is continuing to soften up Von Wagner for some reason. As I speculated on a previous episode, it appears that this angle with the picture of him as a child with the obvious like surgical scars on his head or whatever is meant to be a play for sympathy. I feel like this is them trying to make him likable or relatable in some way. And he continues to sort of soften up to Robert Stone, who keeps asking him about the photo. Again, Robert Stone wants Von Wagner to open up to Robert Stone, and he continues to deny wanting to talk about it, but I imagine at some point he's going to open up about it. Not sure why they're doing this. I'm not sure why Von Wagner is even on NXT television. He got drafted. He's a free agent, which I guess explains why he can show up on NXT. He's a free agent, whatever. He can go anywhere. I guess we're eventually going to see babyface Von Wagner as a result of this. That's just my guess, though. And to end the show, we get Braun Breaker and Carmella Hayes talking more shit to each other. More of what we've seen recently from the two of them. Breaker makes fun of New England because Battleground's going to be in New England, and Carmelo is from New England, and yada yada yada. NXT this week, bit of a nothing burger. As I talked about to sort of open the show, it seems to be in a bit of a lull. They've got to rebuild. They've got to have some time to restructure and fill the gaps left by the superstars that were drafted, because there were a lot of NXT talent were picked up by the main roster after this draft. So they have some holes to fill. They have some rebuilding to do. So I'm not necessarily upset or frustrated that NXT has been a little lackluster this week, maybe the last 2 weeks. So a few other things we saw on the show: Creed Brothers versus the Dyad. Creed Brothers won. We saw the family, I guess as they're called, Stax and Tony D. They had a segment in a restaurant. Stax gets a phone call and he leaves the table, and two officers, cops, whoever walks up, they're credentialed, they have badges, and they take Tony for questioning for some reason. He allegedly was involved in criminal activity, and we don't get much of an explanation there. I guess that's going to lead to something. Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams defeat Drew Gulak and Charlie Dempsey. The crowd has begun chanting Willy Wonka at Charlie Dempsey, which I did not even make that connection before, that Charlie Dempsey does in fact look like Willy Wonka quite a bit. So that was entertaining, but obviously Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams win that match. Kiana James versus Thea Hale. Okay. But besides that, again, NXT this week was a bit of slow nothing, kind of. Moving on. Before we get into the main shows, actually, let's preface by saying we see a lot of debuts of the NXT call-ups this week. And I just wanted to reiterate that I think this particular class of NXT call-ups has the best shot at being successful on the main roster than perhaps any class of NXT call-ups before them. And again, I'll say it, it's because Triple H is the main guy with creative control. It's not 100% Vince McMahon anymore. Of course, he's going to show his face every once in a while and tweak something here or there and fuck something up inevitably. But he's not the man in charge 100% anymore. It's mostly going to be Triple H. I have far more faith in Triple H being able to integrate these guys and girls from NXT into the main roster and find ways to get them over than Vince McMahon was ever willing to do. Vince McMahon, again, it was like these NXT call-ups were mostly dead on arrival when he was in charge. He, I believe, was slightly jealous of how well NXT did for a long period of time as opposed to the main programs, SmackDown and Raw. NXT for a good chunk of years was far more interesting than anything that was going on the main roster. I don't think Vince McMahon liked that very much. When a lot of these guys and girls got to the main roster, Vince was like, "Oh yeah, Karrion Kross, you're great on NXT, brother, but we're gonna make you a gladiator now," and shit like that, like nonsensical shit. But with Triple H at the helm, mostly of creative control, I have far more faith and hope that NXT call-ups, as of this class, will have a far greater shot at not being completely buried once they get on the main roster. Yeah, there's going to be some failures. Not everybody is going to break onto the roster from NXT and instantly become a superstar of great magnitude overnight. Some of them are going to fizzle away. Some of them are going to fizzle out. You may even see some of them go back to NXT eventually, like we've seen Finn Balor do. We saw Apollo Crews do that for a while. I just feel like there's no more reason to be completely afraid for our favorite NXT superstars going to the main roster, because with Triple H heading the charge, they have such a better chance at survival and success on the main roster with him calling the shots creatively. But let's get into Raw. So Liv Morgan was injured, as well as Dakota Kai. Both of them were injured, and they're both going to be out for a while. And this was something that bothered me a little bit. Maybe I'm nitpicking a bit here. But Liv and Raquel had to relinquish the women's tag team titles because of Liv's injury. She's going to be out for an extended period of time. So they were deemed unable to go on with the championships. And this is something that is taking place very soon after Becky Lynch was allowed to sub in Trish Stratus for Lita, who was injured and could not compete, quote unquote, right? And this is just, I know that whole thing with Becky and Trish and Lita was storyline, right? It was so that Trish could turn on Becky. It wasn't like a legitimate Lita's injured, you need somebody else. It was storyline. That they wrote it to happen that way. But it just makes this look a little bit dumb. Raquel can't find a sub in like Becky did. She has to relinquish the belts, as opposed to Becky just a couple months ago when Lita was injured. They were just like, yeah, that's fine. You could just have somebody else tag with you. You can keep the belts. And I know that storyline, but it just makes this look like it doesn't make sense. Again, probably nitpicking. It's just it damages continuity a little bit, which is something I hold in high regard as far as storylines go in wrestling. I want to see the continuity. I want things to make sense. And when things like this happen back to back, where one thing happens because of storyline, but then a similar thing happens, and because it's not storyline, it's automatically different, and they have to relinquish the belts. It's a bad look, at least to me. I know it's something that's easy to gloss over. It's not like Liv and Raquel were lighting the world on fire as a tag team. But it's just, come on, man. Like, yeah, I don't like it. But anyway, there's going to be like a four-way tag team something to determine new champions. Raquel is apparently going to have a mystery partner in that. My mind automatically went to Dakota Kai, as they were previously a tag team in NXT, but apparently Dakota is legitimately injured. Also, my mind went to Shotzi, because of course, why not slap those two together? I wouldn't be surprised if it's Raquel and Shotzi. We'll see what happens with that. We had a battle royal to determine the number one contender for Gunther's IC title. And we saw a lot of debuts in the Battle Royal. We saw the debut of JD McDonough, Zion Quinn, Apollo Crews, Von Wagner. One interesting thing that happened in this was Ziggler eliminated JD McDonough. Ziggler was eliminated shortly after, and McDonough, who was still on the outside, took it as an opportunity to beat the shit out of Dolph Ziggler. I was a little disappointed that JD McDonough was just kind of thrown into this. Before this spot happened, I was disappointed. They didn't... It was like they were just... He was on the same level suddenly as Zion Quinn, right? Who, you don't see him get an entrance. His entrance isn't televised. It just felt a little off to me, because I have high hopes for JD McDonough on the main roster. It makes a little bit more sense now, and in what we saw later in the night with JD McDonough, that they kind of didn't go the whole distance with him in this match as far as like televising his entrance and playing his music and shit like that, and making a big deal about him being in this battle royal. He wasn't going to win this. Don't make it a big deal quite yet, because we have plans for him outside of this. We just needed another guy in this battle royal, and they used it as a way to make him look like a treacherous dude by attacking Dolph Ziggler really brutally, slamming his head up against the ring steps and really going in on Ziggler. Mustafa Ali wins this. We were hearing rumors before Raw even aired that the WWE had plans to make the winner of this battle royal a underdog, and certainly Ali fits that bill. I don't know what to feel about Mustafa Ali. I've always liked him. I don't necessarily like the gimmicks they've been giving him lately. The whole positive Ali gimmick is cheeseball. I would have been a fan of Retribution if there was a reason behind it, but they never really got to a reason for Retribution being a thing. When it first started, I was very interested in it. I thought it was going to be something cool. It ended up fizzling out because there was no story behind it. It was just a group of people with masks and shitty names, just attacking people, and it flopped. But Mustafa Ali's always been good. I always felt bad for the guy. I don't know if everybody knows this. I'm sure a lot of people do, but Ali was supposed to be the guy who Kofi Kingston ended up being. If you remember, back before Kofi Mania, back before Kofi won the championship, it was supposed to be Mustafa Ali in that place. And Kofi ended up taking his spot because Mustafa Ali got his face crushed by Randy Orton accidentally. So he couldn't fulfill that. Kofi Mania was supposed to be Mustafa Ali's run. Go back and look it up. Mustafa got injured, and unfortunately he couldn't fill those shoes, so Kofi took over. And that was fine, that was great. Kofi had a good run. I always felt bad about that for Ali, because that was a huge spot. That would have made him a big star, at least for a while. So it's cool to get to see him get an opportunity like this. I just don't like the things that they've done with his character lately. I don't know if the positive Ali stuff is done. Obviously, he's just going to be cannon fodder for Gunther. Mustafa Ali's not going to beat Gunther. Let's be real. But cool, for him to get a match at Night of Champions. And hey, it's better than nothing, which is what he had been given for a long time. So happy for the guy. At some point after that, we see Kathy Kelly in the back catching up with JD McDonough as he's leaving the arena, asking why he attacked Ziggler the way that he did. The interesting part about this is as he finishes this interview and he continues to walk towards the parking lot, we see off to the side Finn Balor come into view and watch him as he leaves. Now, JD McDonough was trained by Finn Balor. They go back a long ways. They have a storied past. There have been rumors that WWE wants to add a new member to the Judgment Day. Well, to Eureka, we have that member. It's going to be JD McDonough. I mean, the history between him and Finn is too strong. It makes too much sense. And his personality, his crazy, intense, cerebral, surgeon-like precision in the ring, it all makes sense. It would fit into Judgment Day very well. Is it too obvious? Maybe it's too obvious. Maybe it's a tease. But it just makes too much sense. I think this is leading to JD McDonough eventually being recruited into the Judgment Day. We see another debut into Cher debuts. They look good as a tag team. Of course, it was a squash match. Of course, they're going to look good, but they look scary. They look fierce. I like their moveset. Like Veer's elevated elbow drop always looks awesome to me. I think these guys will be good, especially with Jinder Mahal as a mouthpiece for them, as a manager for them. I see them eventually being something worthwhile in the tag team division in WWE. We see Cody Rhodes accept Brock Lesnar's fight invitation. Of course, why wouldn't he accept it? And Judgment Day beats Owens and Zayn in the main event at the behest of Paul Heyman or some shit for some reason. Whatever. That was essentially Raw. A lot of debuts, a few fun spots, some confusing shit with Liv and Raquel giving up their titles, but what are you going to do? Moving on to SmackDown. The show opens up with Roman coming out to talk to Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, or rather, Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens show up as Roman Reigns is standing in the ring about to ask the crowd to acknowledge him. So they come out and they go back and forth. Sami and Roman say that their biggest regret is wasting time on each other, and eventually the Usos come out, interrupt, and attack. Roman Reigns gets pissed off because he said he wants to talk to them. As Roman goes to leave, he accidentally shoulder checks Solo Sikoa, and Solo kind of looks at his shoulder and side-eyes Roman Reigns. And Roman Reigns, uncharacteristically, sort of chicken shits out and is like, okay, I'm just gonna go. And he quickly leaves, but I wonder if they're teasing something between Solo and Roman. I wonder if, some backstory is maybe Solo. Remember back when, before WrestleMania, Cody Rhodes was having some matches against Solo and having some segments with Solo, telling him that he's not ready. I wonder if they're going to use that as a backstory, as Cody Rhodes got into Solo's head. And Solo internally is like, I am fucking ready. You know what? I could be the head of the table if I wanted to. I wonder if we're eventually going to get more tension between Solo and Roman, as opposed to just tension between Roman and the Usos and Solo and the Usos. The way Roman reacted to accidentally shoulder checking Solo was it was surprising. I gotta say, I would expect Roman to like look at Solo and sort of notion for him to stand down. Like, yeah, what? I shoulder checked you. I'm the tribal chief, goddammit. You stand down, dude. That was interesting, I gotta say. I wonder what they have in mind for that. We see the debut of Pretty Deadly, which was exciting to me. I've always loved Pretty Deadly. I've been a fan of theirs since NXT UK. Of course, people are giving them shit for the ring attire. They think it's cheesy. And I don't blame them because when I very first saw Pretty Deadly in NXT UK, I thought the exact same thing. I was like, what the hell is this shit? But they won me over quickly. And I have a feeling they will quickly win over main roster television crowds. They're too good not to. And it's going to happen quicker than I think a lot of people think. People will be surprised at how much they enjoy Pretty Deadly and their matches and their segments. The way this match ended, fun, interesting way to end the match. Like, Elton Prince acts like he's stuck in the ropes and the ref gets distracted and they use that. He gets untangled from the ropes and they do spilt milk, their tag team finisher. And then he goes back to, he ties himself back up in the ropes, acting like he's in distress. They get the win that way. It's just unique. It's different. And it's a fun new way to heelishly end a match. And I just love those two. I can't wait to see what they have in store for Pretty Deadly. We get Asuka beating Zelina Vega. They continue to build up Asuka being a heel. This week, we hear that Asuka is experimenting with chili pepper mist. Chili pepper mist. It's not just poisonous mist. It's chili pepper mist. Okay, you guys? Like, this is next level shit. She is spitting out, like, Frank's Red Hot at her opponents. She is gargling with Tabasco before she comes to the ring, and she is spitting the aftermath of this hot sauce concoction into her opponent's faces. So this, I guess, explains why when she misted Bianca Belair last week, Bianca proceeded to have a tantrum akin to a small child falling off their bike and scraping their knee. Like, she completely lost her shit. I gave Bianca a lot of shit last week for the way that she reacted to that mist. We've seen people get misted and take it like, oh, shit, my eyes. But not at the level that Bianca reacted last week. She full on had a meltdown. She was completely unhinged after she got misted, to the point where it came off as embarrassing. But this week, they introduced the idea that Asuka is actually spitting, like, Taco Bell hot sauce into the faces of her opponents. So I guess it makes sense now that it appears that she is setting her opponent's face on fire with the way that Bianca reacted last week. So there is a reason for the tantrum that we saw out of Bianca. She had, like, Hot One's signature sauce sprayed into her eyes. Like thousands of Skullvilles just right into her retinas. All right. I mean, sure. Why not? Chili pepper mist. I'm down. Interesting curveball, WWE. Chili pepper mist. All right. Moving on, we get the debut of the Grayson Waller effect, which honestly was really not much of anything. I found it actually quite boring. This was not much of anything. Really, really mild segment here. This could have used some chili pepper mist. Grayson Waller, I don't know. What a strange way to introduce him to the crowd. I get wanting to use Grayson Waller effect, the show, to introduce him, but I don't know what to take from this. Very mundane episode of the Grayson Waller effect. So AJ Styles is his guest. Of course, AJ and Grayson Waller have a little bit of history. AJ Styles went to NXT specifically to face Grayson Waller. So there is history there. And I imagine they are setting up Grayson Waller to feud with AJ Styles. And I think this is actually a little bit of writing on the walls as far as the future goes. I think this is something that's destined to happen sooner than later. And I think this just lends more to the fact that Seth Rollins is probably going to beat AJ Styles to become the new World Heavyweight Champion, because why set this up now? Why, if that were something that was going to happen sooner than later, then surely they would just have Grayson Waller debut in a match or a backstage segment. Other than last week where they showed him for a little bit, I think, talking to Adam Pearce about having the Grayson Waller effect the following week. Just a real boring, dull version of what is usually a kind of a high energy and obnoxious show. I didn't get anything out of this, and the crowd was dead for it. They were chanting Grayson. Went on to chant AJ Styles for a bit too, which goes to show you how completely uninterested they were in this. Just a bit of a failure here. I think there could have been a different way to introduce Grayson Waller, who's supposed to be one of their prized pupils coming out of NXT. They could have done it in a different way, and in a way that doesn't sort of really shove home the fact that AJ Styles is probably not going to emerge from Night of Champions as the World Heavyweight Champion. Otherwise, they wouldn't be setting this up right now. I don't know. We see the Street Profits beat LA Knight and Rick Boogs. Knight turns on Boogs after the match, and I really wanted to take this opportunity to say I don't know why, but I really love Rick Boogs. The guy fucking cracks me up. I don't know why. He's just goofy as shit. The I'm booging out thing gets me every time. I don't know why. It's silly, it's stupid, but I fucking love it. I will take more Rick Boogs, please. We see the debut of Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. They beat former NXT women's tag team, Valentina Feroz and Yulisa Leon, who is returning from an injury. I don't know if this means that they're on SmackDown now. It would make sense, given that if they were to return to NXT, they would then be the one and only female tag team in NXT. This goes on to further my point that Alba Fire and Isla Dawn brought those tag team championships with them for a reason. Because there's no female tag teams in NXT. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Danny Palmer and Sol Ruca can't happen. Sol Ruca's injured. Caden Carter and Katana Chance were called up as well. Kiana James and Fallon Henley broke up. Ivy Nile and Tatum Paxley broke up. And now the only other team was Valentina Feroz and Yulisa Leon, who haven't been a tag team for months now because Leon was injured. And now they're on SmackDown. Or at least they have appeared on SmackDown. Maybe they go back to NXT, but even if they are a tag team again on NXT, who are they going to face? There aren't any other tag teams in the female division in NXT. So I think these two are on SmackDown, or maybe they're free agents. Maybe they'll be on Raw too. Who knows? We haven't heard anything. This was a bit of surprise that they were the opponents of Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. And they sort of acted as jobbers. So we'll see what happens there moving forward, but they were the only other tag team associated with NXT, and now they're appearing on SmackDown. So obviously Fire and Dawn defeat them, but this really furthers my point. Again, there are no female tag teams in NXT. I see these championships staying on the main roster and possibly being unified at some point with the main roster women's tag team championships. And later on, to end the night, we see the LWO beat the Usos. The show ends with Roman and Solo in the back, and it appears that Solo is standing up to go do something, to go maybe confront the Usos. But Roman Reigns sticks his hand out and motions for Solo to sit back down. I think the microphone in the back was a little low, so I'm not sure anybody heard what Roman said, but Roman said something. I think it sounded like he may have said, like, we'll wait till next week or something like that. Something to that effect. But yeah, it looked like Solo wanted to go maybe beat the shit out of his brothers, and Roman was like, no, next week. So more tension, right? More possible dissension in the bloodline. the things that happened this week just continue to portray more cracks in the most powerful faction in wrestling right now, which keeps it interesting. Yes, but it's also been something that's sort of been dragging on and dragging out for a little while now. There's been tension in the group for a good amount of time now. And they're going to get to a point where they're going to need to do something about it. Something's got to give. They can't just keep teasing, oh, we might break up, we might fight each other, we might come to fists at some point. They got to do something. Either have something happen that brings resolution to the bloodline, that brings them all back together, that unifies them again, that brings them back into a well-oiled machine, so to speak, and everything's good between the family. But if not that, then have something bigger happen. You can't just... I don't think they can keep getting away with just having these sort of like, oh shit, something might go down between the Usos and Roman, or the Usos and Solo, or Solo and Roman. I like the new added wrinkle of Solo sort of like standing up to Roman when Roman accidentally shoulder checked him. And I like the new added element as well of Roman Reigns showing trepidation when he accidentally shoulder checked Solo. Instead of like, showing him up, essentially. Like, you mad that I shoulder checked you? I'm Roman fucking Reigns, dude. Stand down. That is a side of Roman we have not seen. So hopefully they play up on that. They don't just throw that to the wayside like, oh, that never happened. Give us something new. Give us new stories from these new wrinkles. Something's got to give in this tension, in this teased dissension in the bloodline. It can't just keep rolling and rolling and rolling, and you can't expect it to be interesting. Give us something new. Make something of these new wrinkles, and do it quick, please, because I don't want this to get stale, and I don't want it to get old. It is still interesting. I am still waiting to see what happens next. I'm not like, you know what, fuck it, I'm done. They're never going to do anything. I still have hope that there will be a next evolution in the bloodline storyline, but they're bordering on dragging it out too long in this situation. So I'm glad for the new wrinkles. I'm glad that there's, this simmering whatever between Solo and Roman, but do something with it. We're in, as I said in the top of this episode, we're in that slow period in wrestling. There is no off season, so there's no off time to build excitement. Every year, we get that late spring, early summertime before SummerSlam where it's like, oh, fuck, man, like nothing is going on. So yes, again, I'm glad something is happening still. Something interesting is still going on in this bloodline storyline. But, quit needling and quit tiptoeing about it. Give us some spark. Give us some fucking fireworks. Or you run the risk of this becoming overdone and stale. You're not there yet. Just be fucking careful. So that was it as far as this week in WWE goes. We are just about a week away from Night of Champions. NXT has Battleground coming up at the end of the month, I believe. So there will be plenty of new shit to talk about. Fuck yeah, that's gonna be all for me this week. But I'm gonna get out of here. This has been episode number 12, not 11, 12. Let me get that right moving forward. Of the Facebuster Wrestling Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I will talk to you again soon. Until then, take care.